this is where we're at right now. We got the floor framed up on 2x6s on 16-inch center. I didn't do a lot of detailed video on that for the reason being there's nothing real fancy about it. Just 16-inch center floor trusses, 2x6s, with a layer of 1/2-inch plywood underneath it here. Now that serves two purposes. That makes it more sturdy, and on top of that it encloses this floor with all the insulation, because I live up in the woods, as you can tell by past videos of all the trees and everything going on up here. There's tons of squirrels, and that's going to keep them out of that insulation and from making a nest up in there or going up in it and damaging it. So it's just an added step I really didn't have to make. I talked to the people at Nile who manufacture the kiln for Woodmizer, and they said that wasn't really necessary, but once I explained to them the conditions that I live in, they recommended doing it also. Right here under the floor, you notice this gap, and that's done intentionally. And I got treated 2x4s running lengthways here, 12 footers, that act as sleepers and keep this floor off the concrete pad, which is also a good way, another good way from keeping the moisture come up through the floor, and also gives it a good airflow underneath the building. Now the first problem we ran into today, everything's went pretty smooth up until this point. This ain't really a big problem. I just had to get some extra fern strips. Was this concrete pad was not exactly level. It was very level going the depth of the pad of the building, but the lengthways here, the 12-foot length, it was off about 1.5 inches from this corner to the opposite corner. So what I'm having to do in here is I'd go get some treated fern strips to run on top of some 2x6s and 4x4s, and run the same length or the same way as our trusses to brace this up and to bring it up and make it plumb and level. Because one thing you want a very level floor for a kiln, because your wood is going to dry and it's going to imitate whatever plane that it's on. So if you're drying wood on a plane like this, there's a chance it is going to have some bows and warp and not be too flat. So you want to get it as level as possible, if not perfect. That way you get some good flat boards when you dry them. I hate buying lumber. I had to go buy some pressure treated to put under this. It's aggravating for somebody to own a sawmill to ever have to go buy lumber. Trusses here are on 16-inch centers, and some people do floor trusses on 24-inch centers, but the stickers for the lumber, which are those small spacers between the lumber when it's drying, I'll put a photo up of that here in just a second so you know what I'm talking about. They will line up directly on these trusses. That way the force, and not really the force, but the weight of the wood is transferred down through the stack, through the stickers, directly on these trusses. So this will have 3/4 inch plywood on top of it, but I'll probably paint on top of the paint that I'm supposed to paint the floor with. I'll probably paint some lines so I always know where these trusses are, and that's where the stickers will line up on. And that'll make a lot more sense when we get our first load of lumber in here. But that's the reason for the 16-inch centers for the floor trusses. Is once again, I'm probably repeating myself, that's for the stickers through the lumber to transfer the weight directly down through the stack, directly onto these trusses, so all the weight is on the trusses and not on the plywood between these trusses, causing the plywood to possibly fail or bow, and you'll still get good, true, and stout and straight stacks of lumber that dry straight and flat with no sagging in it. Very important right there. Now we'll do our most tedious work, and that's the insulation. All these plywood seams at the bottom, I'm going to fill with some RTD high temperature silicone. And that's recommended because you not only want to keep this kiln from the air leaking out, the hot air, but you also want to keep the air from the outside and then the elements from coming in. there's our second layer, and now with these two pieces butt up together and mend together here on this insulation, I'm going to use some high temperature aluminum tape like HVAC tape and tape up these seams as good as I can. And then there's a few small gaps here around the floor trusses where there was some wane in the lumber and where my cut was off just a little. I'm going to go ahead and find those small cracks and spray foam them as well before we put our next layer down. Everything's going good so far. It's just really hot out here. It's like 91 degrees today, but I can't complain because at least it ain't raining. Now we got both of our layers of insulation on it. I've also done a lot of spray foam around it, a lot of the gaps. So now we're going to put our 6mm poly sheathing over top of that. Running out of daylight, and I do not think I would get the plywood on top of this frame tonight. But at least got the insulation completed, and the first layer of this 6 poly vapor barrier. And I just talked to a fellow sawyer of mine, and he recommended doing 2 layers if you could. So that's what we're going to do. I got more than enough here for the kiln on this poly wrap, so we will do 2 layers for the floor. So we'll come back in the morning, put the second layer of poly on, then the plywood, and then we'll start siliconing all our seams and all of our screw holes. So not bad progress for a first day here. I'm pretty satisfied of how far we got with this. Something else I like to do here, you guys are seeing me do, I like to put this straight edge I got. It's an 8-foot straight edge on the joist, on the floor joist. And that way I can put a straight line and know where to put my screws at, so I'll hit them every time and not be trying to guess how far over they are. Proposition makes me remember last time I got back. Well, here's the last panel for the subfloor, and I ran short on pine, 3/4 inch plywood, so I had some birch laying around. So this is going to be probably the fanciest subfloor species of wood you'll see right here in the kiln, using some cabinet grade birch. But that's all I got on hand. I want to get this closed up today, so that's what we're going to use.